It will show us who. Well, actually, it'll. I can't remember if it tells us who's showing up. It'll say how many viewers we have. I don't know if you see that screen.
No.
So it'll tell. So it gives me a live viewer page. The live, how long we've been live, how many loves or likes or whatever. And then if people comment, it'll show up for me. I don't know if it'll show up for you, but I can put them on the screen. If people ask us questions. So yeah, like right now it says we have one live viewer. I don't know who it is. Hello, whoever. Normally sometimes they'll comment and say they're here. And I tend to just give them a couple minutes so we can, since, no need to start exactly on time. Right. So you said it was like the apocalypse. Oh, it's Jill. Hi, Jill. It was like the apocalypse. Hi, Karen. This morning at your house.
Yeah, smoky. It's smoky, and I mean the good thing, I guess, if there is a good thing right now, it's not. You can't smell the smoke right now, which is definitely a nice little change of pace, because it's been pretty. Even yesterday it was pretty bad. So, and it's been hot, and I think 106 degrees in Vallejo is definitely a record for September.
So it was like 84 yesterday, and that was too hot.
Yeah.
But we're also getting smoke, and I guess there's a big fire in Eastern Washington that the wind decided to change directions, and so it got all smoky for us and looked all apocalyptic-y. But you know what? Here's the good thing, James, is we all are readily equipped with masks that we're supposed to wear when it's smoky.
Oh yeah. I got mine.
Or I can really bother Jill and Karen, and I can put this one on.
Oh, we can do Bay Area teams. Yeah.
Jill might boo us.
Well, that's the only Bay Area team I root for. For me, it's all about Baltimore. But didn't have basketball growing up.
Yeah.
We had the
basketball team now.
Well, no, they had the Washington Bullets when I was growing up. Now they're the Washington Wizards, which actually I think is probably that was a good name change.
You mean talking about shooting things in DC is not, and Baltimore?
You have to wonder, like, whoever thought that was a good team name, and how did that ever pass like muster in that area of the country? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. History has a way of changing our perspectives.
It does. It really does. You look back, you're like, that probably wasn't the best idea. And I think they actually started as the Baltimore Bullets, but.
Oh, really? Has a nice ring to it, though.
Yeah, Baltimore Bullets.
Yeah.
The Ravens almost became the Baltimore Bombers.
Oh, that's not good either.
No, it's not. Well, they were talking. That was an airplane, not a rioter.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get started. Thanks everyone for coming. And we are doing the re-entry edition of Coffee and Conversations. I think I'm branding it that now. So we're just going to run with it and see how it works. We can also affectionately title this the the Sons of Thunder edition of Coffee and Conversations, because James and John and or you could. Well, depending on which English Bible you look at, I have seen English Bibles from the 16th century that have John spelled Jon. So, or we could call it the PJ squared edition. I don't know. So just so everyone knows, it's really good that we're planning to go back into the building this week, because this is what we had happen over the evening while it was a bit windy. So that's fun. And yeah, isn't that enjoyable? So the tent is no more. It's kind of like when Israel moved into the temple, they no longer needed the tabernacle. And so what I wanted to do this morning is have a conversation with James about re-entry, or more so regathering because James is in California. He lives in Vallejo. He actually was my pastor for a period of time, and we attended the church where he is the congregational pastor. And they've been meeting outside at their building because that's what they're allowed to do in California. And we've been meeting outside while we were able. And since the weather's going to change, we're going to move back into the building. And I just thought it would be good to have a conversation with James about why we've both tried to make this a priority, because there are some churches that are still doing just everything online. They're all just streaming in their services. And really, if we're honest, James and I have talked about this, it's easier to just stream it to everyone. It's kind of nice being able to get up on Sunday morning and eat your bacon and wear your pajamas and not have to go anywhere. It's I don't know, James, is it easier for you? Was it easier for you when you were recording? Because you recorded on Thursday night?
Yeah.
And so,
yeah. I mean, it was definitely easier for us because, I recorded. I mean, the hardest part was getting the sermon done in time to record it. That's really the hardest part. But actually, it's turned out to be something that's really been a blessing in disguise, because now I still have that same schedule where I finish my sermon on Thursdays and I'm ready to go by Sunday. And hopefully it's a little bit better. But for us, I mean, getting up at, before we were uploading as a YouTube premiere on Saturdays, and then it was kind of a set it and forget it. And that really was it. Now we have to actually get up early on Sunday, get there. I get there by 8 for a 10:30 service. We get everything set up outside. The band's got to do sound check. We got to, test the live stream to make sure that it's working. And I mean, it's just been where we're at. We really don't have a whole lot of shade. So outside has been just brutal in terms of the heat. But I mean,
well, may I recommend to you, you get a canopy and you stand under it. Just make sure it's thoroughly attached to the ground, which I thought mine was, but it proved not to be.
I think I'm going to get an umbrella, like one of those umbrellas that goes outside, and I'm under that. I moved my pulpit up about 6 feet into the shade.
Okay,
actually worked out a little bit better yesterday, but I mean, California is so hot right now.
Yeah. What's it supposed to be today?
90s. Yesterday was 98. I think it's supposed to be 97 today.
Yeah.
In September.
And for the people that are here that are used to weather, for it to be 98 in Vallejo is like it being 91, 95 here. So it's we get more rain than you guys and we get colder in the winter, but to hit that hot, I mean, I think when we were living there were maybe a handful of times where it ever got that hot. And so it's outside the norm to let it get that hot. And you guys meet on the preschool property, mm-hmm. The preschool part of the property?
Yeah, we meet in the preschool playground, and we have flags that are set up so that people can know how to social distance. Because I mean, it's one thing to think, hey, we want to gather as a people of God, but you don't have to completely disregard COVID as a serious thing. So we're doing our best to social distance, provide people opportunities to not really have to think too much when they come. Like, am I 6 feet away from somebody else? Like, we just put the flags in and they go and they find their place and they sit there. So we see a lot of people congregating under the shade. There's one big tree. That's really it. And but so far it's been, it's been good.
Yeah. Well, so I think I know as we talked about talking this morning, the verse that kind of came to both of our minds, or the verse is that we had been reflecting upon, has kind of been the heart behind our desire to make sure we are regathering in person, having our congregations come together, is really Hebrews 10, 24 and 25, mm-hmm. Which says, and let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So as you've been reflecting upon that verse, James, what has kind of been your how has that verse been a guiding light, a guiding force in the midst of this? And maybe it wasn't at the beginning, but as time has gone on, it's really shaped your thinking in it. And what, like, for you, what about those two verses has been kind of the motivating factor?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I have really, really struggled with is that, early on we thought, man, this will be a couple weeks, maybe a month or two. So I think it was easy for us to say, you know what, we can go online, and we can provide other ways for people to gather together. We can provide other ways. So we've been a Zoom church for a long time, even before COVID-19. We were experimenting with Zoom meetings, and I have a sermon planning team that's met on Tuesday nights, and that's been a Zoom meeting since long before COVID. When we had a pastor search team a few years ago, they were meeting predominantly on Zoom. So we've experimented with Zoom. We love Zoom, but I'm noticing some shifts in the way that people approach Zoom. And early on, it was really exciting. You got to be there with people, and but now people are basically joining Zoom, and they're still like, back row Baptists. They don't say anything. They just keep their they don't turn their mic on or their camera. They're just kind of there. And it's like, that's not gathering together. That is just you being a part of a Zoom meeting and still being on the fringe and not participating. So, yeah, it's just kind of like, that's not participating, because, gathering together is not just about what you get, but what you give to that community of people.
Yeah.
So, early on, I mean, we definitely saw an uptick in our, in our Bible studies. Our Bible study attendances went up. Our life group attendances went up. So Bible studies for us, Bible studies meet on Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. Life groups meet throughout the week at any given time. All of our attendance of those small groups went up. But over time, people just stopped really engaging. And it was more like, let me be fed, let me be fed, let me be fed, like watching a YouTube video. And that's not gathering together. So, as we've seen some of these shifts, and granted, it's not large scale. There's still quite a few people that are still, actively, participating. But, I just don't think that Zoom was created with the purpose of, you sitting in the background, not saying anything with your camera off. I mean, how much fun would it be? We have radio for that. That's not what this was about. So people were saying early on, hey, we don't need to gather together because we, in person, because we're gathering together on Zoom. We're gathering together around TVs, watching the same sermon. And we were trying to provide people opportunities to gather together. And while, yes, some are doing that, a lot of them aren't. And even the passive involvement, they are. So my shifting, my focus really shifted away from let's push Zoom to, well, we need to provide something for people to gather together. Yeah. And California has changed the rules like 50 or 60 times so far. So early on, they were saying, no, you can get back into your worship center, but then you have to do all of these things. And we were working to do all of these things. And then literally 3 days before we were set to get back in our worship center, they said, okay, you can get back in, but you can't sing. And to me, singing and, preaching the word of God are the two primary means of worship. And I don't believe you can actually have a worship service without both of those things. So we decided, you know what, we're not going to go back in our worship center. And so we went back to the drawing board, and then this idea came up that, oh, well, they're going to, we can be outside and we can sing. People don't have to wear masks the whole time. I don't have to preach in a mask. So that was for us, a more in the direction of where we've decided to go. And it's actually worked out really well because at this, time of year in California, I mean, it doesn't rain. So you don't have to really worry about the rain. Though we did have, one of those freak rainstorms that passed over us, but gave us the opportunity to be able to actually have service outside when it rains. I know you guys, you just go power through, but our people are Californians. So you're from California, you know how that is.
It's sprinkling and you get your umbrella out.
Yeah.
And everyone here is like, that's not rain. That doesn't count. Put your umbrella away.
That's a downpour.
Yeah. And I think, like you talk about singing, and one of the things that when I first, Allison says, what's rain? When we first, one of my reasons for us pushing us to get back together is so we could, it's Zoom and YouTube are so one-sided. You can't see the other people. And I think one of the things that when we're together and we're seeing each other and we're hearing each other sing, we are doing what this Hebrews passage tells us to do. And we're stirring up one another. So we look at each other and we see what, like, hey, the person standing next to me believes this same thing as me. And see, here's what Amber says, James. She says, most people here don't own umbrellas. So we have one in the back of one of the cars, I think. It's a holdover from previous eras and previous times in California. And so one of the things that I think was what really, when we first started pushing for it, it was we wanted the people to see each other. And even when we started with the drive-in church, I had some people who were like, this seems really weird. I'm not sure people are going to like, who wants, like, you're going to come sit in your car. It's easier to watch at home. And one of the things that it didn't really surprise me, but I think kind of across the board surprised people is that how much it actually meant to see each other in person. To even if you're staying in your cars and you're not getting out of them, to see each other and be able to talk with each other. It was really funny. You know how like after a church service, people they wander around the sanctuary and they find the people that they're friends with and they go fellowship and they hang out. We actually saw people doing this. What?
We try to tell people to go find new people.
Well, you know what I mean? Like,
I know what you mean. Sorry.
It was so interesting to watch people do that in their cars. So you would have like after service, like two cars would drive to another part in the parking lot and they would pull up next to each other and talk. And I just think it's so like critical. Like when we think of what it means to be a church or the church, it's a gathering together of God's people. And I mean, that's kind of to some degree what the word means. And, I think you've probably heard people say it, and I'm sure I've heard people say it, but we don't go to church. We are the church. But in your mind, when you hear people say that, like, what do you want? Like, what's your response? What's your like pastorally? What is your what would you encourage someone to, as they're considering what does it actually mean to be a church? What's your thought process behind that?
Well, I think on one side of things, it's become really helpful that people are acknowledging that. We don't go to church. We don't go to a church building or an address, and because I think that idea of going to church is really rooted in consumer Christianity. It's this idea that you go and you get whatever that has to offer, whether or not it's spiritual, spiritual sustenance from the sermon or the worship, all of that. I think it has been helpful to get people to see that no, church doesn't have to be in a building at a specific place. But I think we've taken it too far where people begin to say, well, that means that I am the church by myself. I'm the church by myself wherever I'm at. So I take the church wherever I go. And I think that is incredibly unhelpful, because that kind of assumes that you don't need other people. Whereas while we don't go to church, we are the church. The church never exists outside of the gathering of believers. And even in, I'm thinking of that one passage in where where Jesus is saying, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, Matthew 18. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name. Now that is obviously been, taken out of context to say, well, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, that there's the church, where it's really talking about church discipline. But but it's still the same point. I mean, you can't have a church with just one person. It is a gathering of believers. So I think that's something that people have kind of taken it to the extreme. So I can be a part of the church without going to church, which is true, but you can't be a part of the church without intentionally gathering with other believers. And that's exactly what I think, Hebrews chapter 10 is trying to say. Why were they neglecting to meet together? It's because of persecution and fear of the Roman authorities. That's why they were afraid. Whoever wrote the apostle, whoever wrote Hebrews, I have my view. I know you have your view, but they were trying to say, hey, no, persecution is not an excuse to stop gathering together. And I mean, while I think that, we're in a kind of a different situation with COVID, I don't think that COVID is an excuse for not gathering together. It does look a little different, but it's not an excuse to neglect gathering together as the people of God.
Yeah, you mean there's no asterisk on it? There's no COVID asterisk?
No, and I actually think that Zoom, you could see Zoom as a way of gathering together if you're willing to engage and you're willing to turn your camera on, then yeah, it is. But there are other ways to do it. I mean, I've gathered with other believers sitting, 10 feet apart in their driveway, just hanging out, wearing masks. If that's, 10 feet apart, you really don't need masks, I guess. Depending on who you ask. But, wearing a mask, being diligent and safe. I mean, you can still gather together. But like I think we're talking about worshiping together, it takes more effort now than it did before. And I think it's easier for us to say, you know what, I'll just wait until this is all over. I'm
personally hesitant to say a digital gathering is a gathering, just because are you attending the Ravens football game when you watch it on Fox on Sunday morning or whatever, or I think now Zoom's a little different because you can engage,
right?
If you're actually engaging, but it's kind of it's kind of a supplemental, like it can't fully replace being in the same room with the other person.
Right.
It's harder to read body language. It's harder to tell what someone's thinking. We even ourselves disengage more. Like when you're interacting with someone over a screen, it's way different than when you're sitting at a coffee shop. I'm sure you've had moments where you've been having a FaceTime conversation with someone, and you can tell that they've totally disengaged in a way that they're not. That wouldn't happen if we were both sitting in the same room. And so I think there's some of our natural tendencies when we're not in the same room make it really hard for it to be an authentic gathering. I think particularly with Sunday morning worship, a worship service, whether it's Sunday morning, Sunday night, Tuesday, whatever, or Saturday evenings, like the Hispanic congregation that uses our building, like we can't hear each other sing. We can't see who else is there. And pastorally, we can't know who's there. We can't see what the look in their eyes, the responses they're making. I mean, I'll tell you what, like preaching to the camera is terrible. Like, because you say a joke and you don't know if anyone finds it funny. And there's
by the way.
What?
They didn't, by the way.
Oh yeah, exactly. They just fall flat, and you just go with it, and you say, "Oh Lordy, I hope someone enjoys it." And I think another thing about the the stirring one another up. Sometimes I've heard people say, well, I find that I don't need to be there because I get just as much out of watching online.
Yeah.
And I think there's like, when we're looking at it through that lens, yeah, sure. You may be getting just as much out of it online or whatnot, but at the same time, then you're not thinking about the other person. So like, maybe not just what do you get out of it, but what can you contribute to it? Mm-hmm. And I think, we're all called to, we are one body, many members. And Paul uses the illustration of, the eye can't say to the ear, I don't need you. Like, well, maybe you're the eye and the ear needs you in that moment. And so, but you can't know that when you're on your own, when you're passively, well, that's not passive because people are singing at home, they're reading their Bible. So it's not entirely passive, but it is very omnidirectional, I think. It's
right.
It's not, there's no going back. Like, I don't get to see the people who are watching from home, like, raise their hands if they're worshiping, I don't get to see them opening their Bible and reading it as we're looking at the word. So I think just kind of that, like, not just looking at it from what am I getting out of it, but what am I contributing? And I think that's such a key aspect to being a member of not just the broad church, but a specific church, or a member of a specific local body. And I think I really, like, I've told you this before, but I really wish that sometimes in the New Testament, when it says church, I wish it would just use the term congregation, because we've attached ideas to what church means. And it really is more of a, you're the better Greek guy than I am, but it's this idea of being called out for a purpose of coming together. Yeah. And so I think it's this idea of a public gathering. So when Paul says to the church in Thessalonica, oh my gosh, I just butchered that word, and now I'm not going to be able to recover. The church in Ephesus, he's talking to a group of people that are coming together for something. Right. And it's to spur each other on and to worship and all that. And I have, for the people that have been coming for your guys' service, have you heard from people like, just, hey, this is how this has uplifted my soul in the regathering?
Mm-hmm. For one, I don't know how large your congregation was before COVID-19. We were running about 170. So I think on Sunday, I think we had right around 40. And we had a lot of kids. So that kind of gives you a perspective of where things are right now. So when we did a kind of we did a survey of our congregation, I think you guys did as well, of hey, if we were to reopen gathering in person, would you attend? And we got back probably 50 or 60 responses, and it was kind of split across the board. We gave 3 options, come back right away, give it a couple weeks and see how it is. And the third response was not coming back until, there is a vaccine or this whole thing is over. And it was literally a third. Mm-hmm. So we were looking at, about a third of our congregation, which we anticipated would be, I think it's about 60 people that would come back right away, versus, 120, 115 people that would not. So we had to kind of make this decision. Do we want to do something in person for that third? Then what do we do for everybody else? So that was one of the reasons why it took us so long to be able to meet in person, because I didn't want to record my sermon on Thursday, do all of the work to get it uploaded to the server, and then have to come back and do it all over again on Sunday. I wanted to streamline that to we were doing one thing for everybody. And it took a while. And we talked about, you couldn't get live stream equipment for the first 4 months of this stuff. So it took us a long time. And once we got the live stream equipment, we had to learn how to use it. So but I think one of the important things was giving people the choice, giving people like, not everybody was ready to come back, but certain people were. And we were, in a sense, making a choice for that smaller group that wanted to come back based on the whole. And, finally we were able to to have that, in a sense, the outdoor, is somewhat of a compromise, because we would, ultimately we'd rather be in our worship center. We'd rather have, our comfy seats and, shade and air conditioning. We'd love to have that, but right now, we can't. So with that being said, I think where we're at right now is the people at home are still able to be a part of it. By watching it, they're still able to, be a part of that. But the people who come, I think it has definitely been a huge blessing to them to be able to gather together. Because, like you said, I mean, when you're watching YouTube or Facebook Live or whatever it is, and it's just your family, you don't get to see other people. Yeah. Whereas here, you see other people. You're 6 to 12 feet apart from them, but you can say hi, and afterward you can go up and maybe put a mask on and maybe really engage, throw the elbow or do the fist bump, which, those kinds of things. And I think that's one of the things, like, I think right now people are really craving physical touch in a way that they've never done this before. They're really, even if it's just an elbow or even if it's a fist bump, like just being able to say, and I know some people just don't, they'll just throw hugs up and that's fine. I mean, that's their choice to do that. Yeah. But for me, I'm trying to model some, some social distancing and things like that. But people have been, really, happy with that. And I think we've seen that, it's hard for us, but even for people who, in a sense, the last 5 months has been, just get up, stay in your jammies, grab your coffee and sit on the couch and in a sense, go to church, which they're not going to church. And I think we need to remind people that this is a temporary thing, but it's hard getting up. And I think what I've heard, some families are like, you know what? It was so easy when, my 5 kids under 5, like, not having to get them out the door, not screaming and yelling at them. But even after that, them saying, you know what, it's a lot more work to come to church, but it's worth it.
Yeah. Well, I think that was something that Amber and we really wanted to, when we first started regathering for drive-in church and then actual church, we want our kids, we want Charlie and Josie, we want them to see in our actions that it was worth the effort. Like being with God's people for the gathering was worth the effort. Because honestly, it's easier to put on YouTube and say, "Hey, kids, go play in the backyard and or here's Legos and have fun," and you get to, like that. That's 1,000 times easier. But in the end of the day, what we wanted Charlie and Josie to see was, hey, mom and dad find this is important. They were willing to go sit in the car to be with God's people, to go and make the effort. And so we just wanted them to see that. Now, I know, like, have you had many pastoral conversations with people who are maybe like on the fence about coming back or whatnot?
I think some of the conversations I've had, and this is something I've tried to be very sensitive about, is some of our older congregation members who the idea of not going to church is so incredibly far into them, but they are like, I'm high risk, So when we decided to first open up, I got a lot of phone calls that first week leading up to Sunday or even afterwards saying, "I'm sorry I didn't make it. I'm sorry, I'm just feeling like, I'm not ready to come back." And I had to really affirm some of these people that, it's okay to not be ready to come back. So, shepherding some through that, I think this has really taken its toll on the older members of our church.
The people that have been like, they grew up in an era where if the church doors were open, they were there, and like they church 3 days a week, 3 times a week, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. Like, and they have the health risks, like I'm sure you have, like, I can think of at least one of your deacons that he probably falls into that category, and just so for those health risk people, we want to encourage them to make the wise decision, what has God providentially allowed to occur, someone who is in a nursing home should not feel guilty about not being able to come, like when you have health reasons, that's a legitimate reason that God has ordained for you not to participate.
Right.
And I think where maybe I struggle a little bit is when like those is the kind of the maybe someone who doesn't have the medical reason to not come, but they're just like they're struggling with the maybe the comfort or the worry of coming in person because like I don't want you coming to church to make you feel like nervous or anxious. Like that's not something we want people to do. But at the same time, I want to urge us to obedience. And so I think that's probably pastorally one of the harder places to encourage people is, like where is like where's like, I understand the fear. I understand the anxiousness, or even, hey, wearing a mask makes me uncomfortable. Let's be completely honest. I don't know anyone that likes wearing these things. But what do we do when those things clash or come into contact with maybe what God's word encourages us to do? I think that's pastorally a struggle at this time of how we how do we encourage people to not offend their consciences, but at the same time obey God's word,
Yeah, and I think that's something that I've really rallied around the whole weaker brother argument for this, and I know that's really about alcohol, eating meat, and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, as pastors, we have a responsibility to create an environment in our meeting spaces, or for us, it's a playground that people can feel comfortable to go, where others are not going to violate the boundaries they set around each other. They're not going to look down on them if they want to wear a mask. They're not going to look down on them if they don't want to hug. And that's something I've seen. Like, I had one person who said, I'm afraid if I come there, everybody's going to be in masks, and I don't want to wear a mask. Now, outside in California, we don't have to wear masks. Inside, we have to wear masks. Yeah. So outside, you don't have to wear a mask. Are you even
allowed inside right now?
No, we're not allowed inside. Okay. Not even for that. They've completely changed everything. So
you have to sleep in your backyard, right?
Yeah. So for the most part, people are just like, this one person, I don't want to come. I don't want to wear a mask. I don't want people to look down on me if I'm not wearing a mask. Yeah. So the first week we came there, for the most part, people were wearing masks as they arrived. They, some weren't. Yeah. But they were wearing a mask as they were arrived. They found their seat. They sat with their family and they took them off. And that's really been, how we are. There are certain people that can't, like our media team. Our media team can't be, we can't really maintain 6 feet of distance apart from them. So they're wearing masks, but everybody else is kind of, self-selected out of wearing masks during the whole thing. So we wanted to create an environment where people felt comfortable and safe to come without feeling like they were judged one way or another. Because there are some people that are like, yep, there's going to be masks. I don't want to come. Other people are like, there's not going to be masks. I don't want to come. So we've really tried to create an environment where everybody feels like they can come and do whatever level of social distancing they have.
Yeah. Well, for us, the mask question is kind of moot because unless you have a medical exemption or you're under the age of, you're 5 and under, they've said you need to be wearing a mask. So, I mean, we may not have been perfect with it, but that, like, even for our outdoor gatherings, even if we had 25 feet between everyone, they still mandated that we were supposed to be wearing masks. And when we come back in the building, we have to wear masks. Like, I preached Sunday morning with the mask on because, I wasn't sure what it was going to be like. And I wanted to remind myself what it was going to be like for this Sunday coming back into the building. Like, these things fog up with the mask, and
absolutely.
It makes it harder to read when you're all fogged up. I'll tell you what, this whole mask thing is going to drive me to contacts, and I'm not happy about it.
Have you ever worn contacts?
No.
Oh, so
I didn't wear glasses until a year and a half ago.
Wow.
So the idea of touching my eyeball is uncomfortable to me.
Man, get over it, man.
Yeah, I know.
It's the only way to fly. This is the way. Contacts are the way.
You have spoken.
I have spoken.
Yeah. So I think I wholeheartedly agree with that. The being sensitive to where other people are at.
Yeah.
And like, how do we? Yes, Amber says, I am afraid to touch my eye. I have no shame in that. I am fearful of touching my eye. It just weirds me out, man. And that was actually something I kind of talked about last week in our devotional time, is just bearing with one another. And I don't ever remember in my entire life seeing anything this polarizing. And I don't know about you. Like, I mean, I know that, like, we're the same age, we're young, and so we don't have as long a breadth of life experience as some of the other people we know. But I can't ever remember a time in my life seeing something so divisive. I don't know if that's the right word, but so polarizing that isn't like a strict political perspective. Like, I mean, I remember people being divisive over the Affordable Care Act, or who to vote for in 2016 and who to vote for in every 4 years. But I don't remember it, like, ever there being this, like, divisive over, like, what people should be doing. It just feels like this has ranked, and maybe it's because we're not seeing each other and we're not in the same room, and so we can't punch each other if we say something that is mean, and so we're more amped to be hardline. But it just feels like this is super divisive, and helping and really maintaining unity in the midst of it. It feels really it's a fine line to how do we maintain it. So like, I don't know if you guys are experiencing that, or
I mean, I think early on, it definitely was something. I mean, right now, I mean, we definitely have people that are anti-mask, but they don't make a big deal about it. And I think the reason they don't make a big deal about it is that we don't make a big deal about it. We're about individual liberty to make some of those decisions, whereas in the world around us, I mean, you can't go to a store without wearing a mask. You can't you can't go to your bank without wearing a mask. Like, you can't do anything without wearing a mask outside. Well, inside in California, and I know that it's county by county, and Solano County here in California has definitely been a little bit more lax on some of the some of the requirements that the state has kind of either recommended or mandated. So other counties, they have to wear masks outside. I mean, but for us, I mean, we haven't really made a big deal about it. So I mean, that's been that's been something, and I don't think it's something we set out to do. We didn't really set out to let's figure out a way to not make this a volatile third rail issue.
Yeah.
Let's not do. We just didn't, and people have been somewhat respectful of that, and we've seen it. I mean, 90% of people who come to our services on Sunday morning are wearing masks, at least to come in. When they sit down, they take them off with their family, and they sing, they worship, and when that's over, they put them back on, and it's just a self-selecting thing. And and the people that aren't wearing masks are not rubbing it in people's faces. They're not saying, "Oh, you're being controlled by the media and all that kind of stuff." And they're not going up and saying, "Why won't you hug me?" And don't you know this is fake and it's not. I mean, nobody's doing that. Everybody is exercising a certain degree of love, and I think it's because we're seeing each other face to face. When I'm sitting behind a computer, I can type whatever I want, but when you're face to face with me, there's, particularly when it's, people that prior to this were your friends, they were your church family, you love them. And I think being back together reminds us of our love for each other. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard when you have that, when there is this object between us, and it like, it's much easier to say something offensive when you don't have to look at the person actually in the eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I feel like I haven't seen any of that in our church, of people being like looking down or rubbing their nose, rubbing other people's faces. And, I think to some degree, like part of that for us is we're just saying, hey, this is what the governor has asked. And we don't think this is a issue of biblical obedience that we are called to disobey the governing authority. Like the governing authority has asked us to do this, and it doesn't contradict scripture. So we're gonna go with it. And Lord willing, we won't have to wait very long to not. And I think, like you brought up early on in this conversation, is like, we all thought this was going to be over in 4 weeks, like we're going to flatten the curve, and then it's going to go, it'll be done. We'll be okay. But just as time has gone on, it just seems like, man, this is going to, we can't just pause. It felt like we could just pause in the beginning. And now it feels like we have to move beyond pausing. Early on, it felt like, what do you do when I mean, I've never lived in anywhere where hurricanes are a possibility. You can get hurricanes in Baltimore, right? Like,
well, for us, it was more,
like a blizzard.
Blizzards were the bigger deal.
Yeah. So when you have a blizzard, you're going to cancel church. You're going to cancel the public gathering when there's a blizzard, because there's an existential threat. We didn't know what COVID-19 looked like. We didn't know how to handle it. And so early on we said, okay, we're going to pause, because we don't know what this looks like. It's the wise thing to do. But as time has gone on, we've needed to say, okay, we can't, to some degree, we can't hide forever. Right. And so we need to work to get back to obeying what the scriptures have said. And I think part of that is gathering together. And so. Yeah.
And I think that's where I think we're at. And, I mean, I'm in California, and there's 2 really high profile churches that are basically pushing back against the governor and saying, you know what, we don't have to listen to you. It's our First Amendment right. Yeah. And, and while that's not necessarily something I am, I feel called to push back from North Hill's perspective, I am grateful that there are pastors out there that are pushing back. And the reason I say that is because, I mean, the governments, California, Washington, across the country, have really flexed a lot of muscle regarding the churches. Yeah. And, that muscle has led to the perception of certain powers. And without those pastors that are pushing back, governments don't tend to give back the power that they give. So, with that being said, and those are 2 very, very different churches, 2 very different situations, and 2 very different responses. I mean, So I think that's something that, we may, will we get to that point where, we have to say enough is enough? It's been 9 months, it's been a year. We need to get back to Scripture, because all of us, like you said, I mean, we were willing to flatten the curve. We were willing to take a step back and say, hey, if this is for the good, if this is what loving our neighbor looks like in this particular time, we're willing to do it. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the future looks like, but I feel like what we have done, we've prayed, and that's something people need to understand. I don't know of any pastor that's just willy-nilly going about this and saying we're going to do whatever we want. It's bathed in prayer. It is, it's with a lot of fear and trepidation, not just because of a virus, but it's also because of God. None of us want to be that pastor that opens too early, and next thing you know, like half his congregation comes down with COVID. We did not. So, will we in the next 10 years? I mean, will that happen in seminaries? I mean, many will look back on this, and we'll either have learned a great deal about it. I do think that it will. I mean, online presence is not a bad thing.
Right.
And many
Amen.
Even smaller churches have gotten to that point. But my hope and my prayer is that, because of this, we haven't trained our people to say gathering together in person is not important because we can do it online. That would be my biggest fear.
Yeah.
And even people like, I don't know about you, but, I have people that watch the sermons, from other states. We have people in other countries because of our mission work in the Philippines that are doing that. I would never, ever, ever want them to say North Hills is my church, even though I live 3,000 miles away.
Yeah.
I would encourage them to find a local church, pour themselves into it, fall under the authority and leadership of whatever their leadership structure looks like, and submit to that church in building up the body of Christ, because that is what it means to be a church. Yeah, it's not a building, but it is a people who exist to, encourage one another as the day of Christ's return draws near. That's what a church does.
Yeah. Sweet, man. Well, I think you have staff meeting in a couple minutes, right?
8 minutes. I'm good.
Oh. Well, I think that's probably a good note to end on. Someone asked me yesterday how long we were going to go, and I said, well, normally the conversations go a little bit longer than when it's just me talking. So I think, we talked about a bunch of it. Thanks for hanging out and chatting. So, good to see your face. Even though I can't punch it, although I probably wouldn't right now anyways. I couldn't, that whole social distancing thing. Amber says, thank you. Jill said, this was good. So, thanks, man. If you want to jump off, you feel free to. I'll probably give people a few announcement type things here.
Okay.
So, since they'll need to know stuff for Sunday. So,
sounds good.
All right, man.
Thanks a lot.
See you.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. All right, friends. So that's James. He's probably one of my best friends. I should have said that while he was watching, but anyhow. So Sunday, we're going to be back in the building. Chairs are separated by the spacing. We're going to have a certain number of certain seating arrangements. Email will come out about that later when Amber says, James is my BFF. Yes, Sons of Thunder. My wife is distracting me. Okay, where were we? We'll have to register. Email will come out about how to do that later on, and kind of some of the specifics will come out later. We're going to have one bulletin for every set of chairs, and we'll have communion elements in the little prepackaged things placed on every chair. The bulletin's going to change a little bit, so there's not going to be quite as much information in it. all the like takeaway stuff is going to be gone. There's not going to be pens for you to use. There's not going to be any note sheets. So if you are a note taker, get a journal, get a moleskin, bring a blank sheet of paper, write on your hand, your forearm. If you're going to do that, use a Sharpie, and then you walk around with my sermon notes on your arm all day, all week. That'd be fun. Hey, then you might be more inclined to remember a part of the text. I don't really care if you remember what I say, but if you remember what the text says and the point of the text, that's fantastic. So I'm looking forward to Sunday. This is going to be more work than what it looks like to what we were doing before with just streaming. But I think it's worth it for us as we are together and we encourage one another until the day draws near. And we're going to have, and we'll, 2 services takes more work. Bill is probably happy to be inside, so he doesn't have to set up every weekend for that. Speaking of which, if you see Bill and you have benefited from the live streaming or even the when we were doing worship in the Word, just give him a huge encouragement. He went above and beyond every week to make that happen. You guys would show up at 9:30. Bill was here at like 7 a.m. setting up, sometimes in the rain, in the sprinkling. And, and then he would be there afterwards tearing down. So Sunday mornings for Bill were a huge effort. Along with him, Josh Benner, Jonathan Hamburg, Scott Johnson, Aaron Stamper, all those guys. Bill led the charge. He oversaw the team. And all those guys were just tremendous in their dedication and their efforts and their willingness to contribute. And so if you see them, talk to them, just say, hey, thank you so much. If you benefited from it, or just even if you didn't benefit from it and you want to say thank you to them, they really made it a huge help. So know that you have people at your church body that are putting forth time and effort to make things like that happen. And I think they should be commended for those efforts. So, all right, friends. Wow, we're almost an hour. So I hope you have a great week, and I will see you Sunday. Oh, don't forget, work day on Saturday. We would love for you to come and help get the building ready for Sunday morning and do some other things around here for maintenance stuff. So if you're available, come Saturday morning, not Sunday morning. Come both, actually. Come Saturday morning at 9 to do some work, bring mask, bring tools, and we'll have stuff to work on. And then we'll see you Sunday morning. All right, friends. Hope you have a great week, and I will see you then.